So this week we've been reading the Magic Treehouse, Dolphins at Daybreak. And I know you guys wanted to hear the last couple of chapters, so I thought I would go ahead and read them for you. When we left off, Jack and Annie were swimming because the submersible was sinking. And our chapter's called Swim for Your Life. Jack moved his arms slowly. He moved his legs slowly. He gently pushed the water out of his way as he did the breaststroke. Calm, calm, he told himself. Annie swam beside him. They headed for the reef. All was calm. Then Jack saw something out of the corner of his eye. A dark fin was zigzagging through the water. It was heading towards them. Jack wanted to splash. He wanted to yell, but he remembered. Calm. I better not tell Annie, he thought. She'll stay calmer if she doesn't know. He began to swim faster, then faster. Annie went faster too. They both swam as fast and as calmly as they could. Sometimes Annie went even faster than Jack, which made him swim faster and faster. Jack was so scared that he wasn't tired at all. He was swimming for his life, and Annie's too. He didn't look back to see is the shark still there. He didn't want to know. He just kept his eye on the treehouse in the distance, and he kept swimming. Jack and Annie swam and swam and swam. It took forever for the treehouse just to get a little closer. Jack realized that the reef was farther than he thought. He kept swimming, but his arms and his legs felt so heavy. Annie was struggling too. Float, she said, float. So Jack and Annie turned on their backs. They floated the way they learned in swimming class. We'll just rest a minute, then we'll keep going. But the more Jack floated, the more tired he felt. Soon, he was too tired even to float. He started to sink. Then he felt something. His heart stopped. Something pushed him in the water. It was slippery and alive. Had the hammerhead caught up with them? Jack shut his eyes and waited for the worst. He waited and waited. Finally, he opened his eyes. In front of him was a shiny gray head, a dolphin head. The dolphin pushed Jack with his nose. It made happy clicking sounds. Hooray! Cried Annie. Jack looked over at her. She was clinging to the fin of another dolphin. Her dolphin was moving through the water. Jack grabbed the fin of his dolphin. Then the two dolphins swam smoothly through the water, pulling Jack and Annie toward the reef. I want to show you the picture. Ouch! The sun shone on the ocean. It sparkled like a diamond. Jack felt safe now. His dolphin was taking good care of him. The dolphin slowed down as they neared the reef. Jack lowered his feet. He felt the bumpy coral. He let go of the dolphin's fin and stood up in the water. Annie stood up too. Then she threw her arms around her dolphin and gave her a big hug. "Thank you, Suki," she cried, and she kissed the dolphin's nose. Suki tossed her head and clicked at Annie. "Kiss Sam now," Annie said to Jack. "You're nuts," said Jack. But Sam nuzzled Jack's head, and he put his flippers around Jack's neck. Jack couldn't resist. He threw his arms around the dolphin and gave him a quick kiss. Sam nodded and made clicking sounds like laughter. Then he turned to Suki. The two dolphins chattered for a moment. Then they nodded at Jack and Annie and swam gracefully away. "Bye, Suki. Bye, Sam," Annie shouted. "Thanks," Jack shouted. The dolphins leapt high into the air. Then they dove back down into the water with a splash. Jack and Annie laughed. "I wish we could swim like that," said Jack. Jack and Annie watched the dolphins until they disappeared. "I miss them already," Annie said softly. "Me too," said Jack. He sat down in the shallow water. "I'm really tired," he said. Annie sat beside him. "Me too," she said. The warm water lapped around their shorts and t-shirts. Jack pulled off his backpack. He took out his glasses and put them on. They were blurry with water. "Guess what?" said Annie. "What?" said Jack. "I saw the shark when we were swimming," Annie said, "but I didn't tell you because I wanted you to stay calm." Jack stared at her. "I saw it too. I just swam faster so you would swim faster." "And I swam faster so you would swim faster," said Annie. "I guess we swam double fast then," Jack said. He shook his head with wonder. "What now?" said Annie. "We go home," said Jack. "But we haven't solved Morgan's riddle yet," said Annie. Jack sighed. He pulled his notebook out of his pack. It was soaked. He pulled out the ocean book. It was soaked too. "We failed," he said. "My research is all wet. We'll never be master librarians now." Jack put everything away. "Let's go," he said sadly. He stood up and he started across the pink reef toward the treehouse. Annie followed him. "Ouch!" Annie said. "What's wrong?" Jack looked back at her. "I stepped on something." Annie bent down to rub her foot. "What?" said Jack. "A shell?" "Yeah, this." She picked up a large gray shell. Boy, is it rough. Rough and gray as rock. "And plain as plain can be," whispered Jack. They had found the answer. The shell looked like a clam shell, only bigger, with more ridges. "How could this ugly shell be the answer to the riddle?" said Annie. "What about the part that says, 'There's great beauty in me'?" "Wait, research," said Jack. He opened the soaked research book. The pages were stuck together, but he was able to turn a few. He found a picture of a gray shell. He read, "Divers search for oysters in deep water, but sometimes oysters wash up on reefs or beaches. Inside some oysters, you can find a pearl. The pearl's natural beauty makes it a treasure." "It must have a pearl inside," said Jack. Annie peered into the crack between the two halves of the shell. "I can't see anything," she said. How does a pearl get in there anyway? Jack read from the wet page. Sometimes a grain of sand will get between the oyster's shell and its skin. This irritates the oyster, so it makes a pearly material to surround the grain of sand. In this way, over a few years, a pearl is formed. I can't tell if there's a pearl or not, said Annie. Maybe we should bang it against a rock, said Jack. Now that would really irritate an oyster, said Annie. Yeah, maybe we should just leave it alone, said Annie. She gently put the oyster back in the water. But how will we know if oyster is the right answer to the riddle? Said Jack. Morgan said, we'll know, said Annie. Come on. Jack pushed his glasses into place. Then he and Annie picked up their shoes and socks. They climbed through the window of the treehouse. Morgan's scroll was lying on the floor. It was open. Look, said Annie. She and Jack stared at the scroll. The riddle had faded away. In its place was one shimmering word. O-Y-S-T-E-R. Morgan's magic, whispered Annie. Jack let out a huge sigh. Whew, we got it right. And here's the Pennsylvania book, said Annie. Let's go home. She opened the book. She pointed to the picture of Frog Creek Woods. I wish we could go there, she said. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. The wind blew harder and harder. It was going really fast. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. The true pearl. Dawn light slanted into the treehouse. No time at all had passed since they'd left. Day was breaking. Jack rolled up the ancient scroll and tucked it into the corner. We solved the first riddle, he said. 3 more to go. I don't see another scroll, said Annie. Maybe tomorrow we'll get the next riddle. That's okay, said Jack. I think I need to rest and dry out. His t-shirt and shorts were still soaked. His backpack, too. Only his shoes and socks were dry. And this needs to dry out, said Annie, pointing to the ocean book. And she put it in a patch of sunlight. Then Jack and Annie climbed down the ladder. They walked through the woods, through the leafy shadows and golden light. They left the woods and started down their street. You know, we should have found the answer to the riddle right away, said Jack. The oyster was on the reef all along. I know, but we wouldn't have had so much fun, said Annie. Fun, said Jack. You call being squeezed by an octopus and chased by a shark fun? Don't forget the dolphins, said Annie. Jack smiled. Right, the dolphins made up for everything. They were fun. I guess they were the true pearl in the ocean. Yep, said Jack. I wonder what Sam is doing right now. Sam? Annie grinned at him. You're nuts. They climbed their steps and went into the house. We're back, Annie shouted. Did you get your shoes wet? Their mom called. Not one bit, said Jack. But he and Annie slipped upstairs to change their clothes. And that would be the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I do.